There's this perception, like there's sales reps even in our organization that are like, solar's only got 2 years left. Is that the issue that you're saying is just not true?
This is a myth that it's going away in 2027. It's not.
This is the Solar Disruption Theory.
This is the Solar Disruption Theory podcast. My name is Chad Towner. I'm your host. And with us today, we've got back in the studio, Brett Bouchy, CEO of Freedom Forever. Brett, it's been a while. The last time you and I spoke, it was right after the initial version of the Big Beautiful Bill had just made it out of the House. So the whole world turned upside down for a couple of months. How have you been? Good to have you back.
Yeah, it seems like that was a decade ago. Like the last 8 to 10 weeks has just been an incredible up and down roller coaster. And that cliche that we use in our industry, solar coaster, which I hate, it truly had more peaks and valleys in the last 10 weeks than we had ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, it was like you love that scripture of, hey, don't worry about tomorrow. Each day has enough trouble of its own. I heard you quoting it on a daily basis, but it got to a point where you were starting to quote it like on an hourly basis. It was like you'd wake up in the morning and something would come out, news would be one thing, and then by the afternoon, it was completely different. So, as the CEO of the largest residential solar installer, what happened? Like, what did you see from your perspective, and why did it have such a huge impact on all of solar, from the sales reps to the installers to the equipment manufacturers to the finance companies to the investors? Like, everything was in turmoil.
Yeah, I liken it to, if anybody like are business historians and you've studied what happened in 2008 where credit markets seized up, it was very similar to that, but just specific to our industry. And, ultimately, obviously at the point that the bill happened and it was introduced in the House Ways and Means Committee, Sunnova was already in trouble, but they still had not filed bankruptcy. But it just created this, everyone became paralyzed, all right? Capital providers and finance companies, and I've said this a lot, finance companies are essentially middlemen. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm not trying to throw shade on the finance companies. But typically, they're literally creating assets and then packaging them up in a securitization, and they're selling them into the asset-backed security market, the ABS market, very similar to how mortgages is done, which has created the crisis in 2008. And essentially, it was clear with the uncertainty of the bill, and will there be tax credits? Will it be commencement of construction? Just everyone sat on the sideline. Everyone said, I'm not going to buy residential solar assets. And as a finance company that depends on being able to sell those assets in securitizations, that became very scary for them. And they had limited capital. And when you have no off-ramp for your capital, you become very, very nervous. And you saw everyone within our industry turtling over a 10-week period, which is just my own term of like everyone was just brought their legs in and protected themselves, and it created massive chaos in the market. And there was periods of times that, I think everyone just thought that even if the tax credits went away at the end of 25, there would be this gold rush period. But I don't think people realized how tenuous it was for a few weeks.
Yeah, and so, but like when that first came out, some people thought, oh, there is going to be this gold rush because we have this window where the credits are still viable. But that's not what happened. The paralysis you were talking about, why were the finance companies or really the takeout partners, the ABS markets, why were they so paralyzed when we knew every day that it took to get something signed was another day that we had these tax credits? It wasn't about whether we had the tax credits today. It seemed like the money had dried up because, in a world of investors, as I'm learning, like they obviously want to invest in a good, positive, uptrending market. But even if they know that it's not in good shape and things are going to be bad, that's better than this kind of gray area. The term that you keep using was uncertainty, right? Why is uncertainty so bad for investors? It's like that seemed like that the bill or the proposal of the initial bill, that was the word you used all the time, was like there's uncertainty. And I didn't understand how bad that was for investors.
Yeah, as an investor, and my background was in investment banking, and I was a private investor in a lot of companies. And like, you want certainty of what your return is going to be. And the worst possible scenario is when you don't have certainty, because no matter how good or bad the outcome is, you can always peg an interest rate to the risk and you can find if it makes sense to invest. But when there's complete uncertainty, you're like, I can't invest in this. And I think people do not understand that like 95% of our customers are financed. Only 5% of that is cash.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so different. And we're dependent on the capital markets. And with the ultimate takeout partners, if they're not buying residential solar assets, there is no market.
Yeah.
Like when people thought that there was going to be this gold rush, like it only was going to be a gold rush if you had people willing to buy it. And the problem with the uncertainty was, even when we talk about the tax credits ending at the end of the year, what does that mean? Is it placed in service? Does that mean you need to get PTO? Does it mean you have to have install? And so you get very precarious when you're talking about, hey, you need the system energized and you need PTO. Because we've seen in times when like NEM ended, you saw the utilities get backed up.
Yep.
And we saw this in California, not so much in Illinois, where you saw utilities getting months behind. And so as an investor, if you want to buy like loan securitizations, you want to make sure that the customer is going to get the tax credit. Because guess what? If the customer doesn't get the tax credit, do you think he's a higher risk of default? The answer is absolutely.
Yep.
And so how do you guarantee if you sell a loan in July or August that you're going to guarantee and get the tax credits at PTO? So what people didn't realize is that it could have collapsed like much, much quicker than people thought. There wasn't this runway of 6 to 7 months if it came out and it was uncertain. And if you think of how the administration has targeted solar and wind, like they know this. In politics, you never say no, you just delay and you create uncertainty. All right, delays and uncertainty in politics is a no. That's what everybody was afraid was going to happen. So that's why it's one of those things that sometimes I wish I didn't understand this and I could just show up to work every day and not worry about it. But with that being said, there is scripture. You can't do anything about it. And even though I use that scripture every day, it's because I had to remind myself there's nothing I could do about it. And so we just had to block and tackle. We had to deal with the challenges. And I started getting up during this 10-week period a lot earlier because the only time I had peace in my day was like 5 to 7. By 7 or even 8, there was some bad event that happened that I was going to have to deal with that day. And so I'd plan out my entire day. I would read in the morning, but like it was tough. And so I just started getting up earlier. And then there was days I started getting up at 3:30 and 4 because 5 wasn't early enough. And, you know, you just had to get through it. And I'm just thankful that we're past that. And it doesn't mean everything's going to be rosy. There could be some more uncertainty around the executive order, but I feel really good with where we are right now.
All right, so let's fast forward to the bill because it was so back and forth and so volatile, and it was like every day we're getting new news, and we had team members in Washington meeting with senators, and it was just getting leaks of information, trying to keep up with what's going to happen. We finally got the certainty, right? On July 4th, it got signed. We started to feel a lot better on the Friday before of the week before, which was awesome. But now that the bill is signed, what is in the bill? I know the solar industry in and of itself, like we were relieved on one hand, but on the other hand, they did effectively kill the credits in the solar industry. So where did it land? And then we'll talk about the executive order.
Yeah, by any stretch of the imagination, this is not a win for the residential solar industry. But based on what we are facing and the expectation and the worst case scenario and the best case scenario, it landed somewhere closer to the best case scenario than it did the worst case scenario. And what I mean by that is you have a combination. Is like we know we have placed in service to 2027. So placed in service, for everybody that's listening, is devastating for commercial, industrial, and utility because it takes 2, 3, 4 years to get those projects finished. So if you have something placed in service, it essentially shuts everything down. But the way that we got commencement of construction language, how we eliminated the negative parts of the bill around residential solar, those were amazing. And the commencement of construction language is incredibly positive. And there is some concern around the executive order that could potentially change. But if you understand executive orders are done prospectively and forward. And the law is codified. So most experts, legal scholars will say that safe harboring is going to be available through either 2029 or 2030.
Yeah.
But one of the things that people are not talking about enough is the tax credit for storage didn't get touched.
Yeah.
So whenever the safe harboring ends, and again, not all finance companies are going to be able to take advantage of safe harbor, and not all finance companies are equal. The ones with the biggest balance sheets will have a huge advantage with safe harbor, and they're able to just safe harbor more equipment because it takes a huge capital investment to be able to do that. So be wary of that when you're looking at finance companies. So we do think some finance companies are going to be advantaged over them, even though they might not be doing a lot of volume today. But we'll have to see what happens. But back to the storage aspect. When safe harboring ends at either the end of 29 or 30, assuming that is safe, then we have a full tax credits, domestic content, LMI, which is low income, like energy communities, you get that all on energy products. So you're going to see everything after safe harboring ends will be sold with a battery. All right. And you might see 2 batteries on projects.
Yeah.
And you're going to see the economics are not going to be as disadvantaged today versus when that happens, because a significant amount of the cost is going to be in the storage. And you can financially engineer and get a significant amount of the tax credits that we're getting today. Now, again, everybody talks about the 30% tax credit going away in 25D, and I'm going to get there in a second. But people need to understand that on TPOs, they are getting around a 45% blended ITC tax rate. That's a combination of the 30% that they get on all projects, large portion of domestic content, getting some LMI, some low income, and also getting a high percentage of energy communities. You even have some finance companies that target and pay you more for having energy communities.
Right.
So like the economics have never been better in solar. And this perception that people have that like solar is dead or it has a limited shelf life is just false. It's based out of ignorance. They don't understand it because there's been so much certainty. And every publication that you put up, it like says the end of solar, this is bad.
Right.
But a lot of that has to do with like C&I and utility. And so they were harder hit than residential solar. And other people, when you talk about solar in general, all right, only 5% of solar is residential. 95% is commercial, utility, and industrial. So those are the issues that's out there. So like we're not that big. And, we have a runway with tax credits all the way through 2032. Now, we are looking and we have to create a company going forward to operate without the tax credits. But we're not going to have to do that until 2033. So, and our goal is still the same. The mission is still the same. We have to get our cost down as low as possible using economies of scale. And we need to be selling to the customer under $2 a watt. And we also need to be able to install for close to $1 a watt, which is absolutely achievable and is being done right now in Europe.
All right, so there, and you've alluded to this perception, this thinking that, you know, these credits and pretty much solar in general is done at the end of 2027. And that's not true, not correct, because this safe harboring strategy, finance companies, TPO companies, third-party ownership, they can buy the modules, buy equipment that qualifies for the tax credits before they expire. Therefore, that's safe harboring, basically making, you know, they start the project ahead of time. And if they buy 4 years worth of product, then they could extend this whole thing another 4 years. Is that what you're getting at? Because there's this perception, like there's sales reps even in our organization that are like, you know, solar's only got 2 years left. Is that the issue that you're saying is just not true?
That is not true, but it's also storage. All right. So storage, 3 years ago, we were less than 3% storage attachment. 2 years ago, we were 5%. Today, we're 50%.
Yep.
So when these tax credits go away on TPO for PV, they don't go away on storage. And so you can financially engineer a product, a TPO product with a battery that's going to get a significant amount of that 45% of the tax credits. So like this is a myth that it's going away in 2027. It's not. And every finance company is looking at creating like TPO products with batteries, with multiple batteries. The negative to our industry, which is absolutely true that everyone is writing about, is 25D is going away. And 25D is the 30% tax credit. Because remember, purchases, loans, and cash are not eligible for low-income energy communities or the domestic content tax credits.
Right.
But that is going away at the end of the year. And that is devastating for the industry. Now, a lot of us that work in door-to-door are like, well, that's no big deal because 80, 85, 90% of my deals are TPO. But when you look at 2024, only 50% of the projects that were installed in residential solar were TPO. Half were purchase and loan. And a lot of people like know how big Freedom is. We're big, but we're only 11% of the overall market. Sunrun might be a similar amount, call it 10, 11%. After that, there is a drop off, and the next largest installer is about a quarter the size of us.
Yeah.
So you really look at it, Sunrun and Freedom are 20 to 25% of the business, and the long tail, the small to medium size installers, are like 75 to 80% of the volume. A significant amount of those contractors only do cash and loan. And TPO is much more difficult to install. It's much more difficult to get paid for a variety of different reasons. There's a production element. It's not just building a 10 kW system for a fixed price. There's a production element that makes it more complex.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. You not only have to build the system, but it has to produce a specific amount of energy, or you don't get paid, or you have to fix it. That is what's so unique. So there is going to be a tremendous amount of stress on the small to medium size installers. And then also now we're back to a situation today, as soon as the bill passed, the residential, and I talked about this early, people were not willing to buy residential solar assets because of the uncertainty. As soon as you saw certainty with the bill, that changed overnight. All of a sudden, everyone wants more volume again. And that's a really good situation for us specifically in our industry. And so that's what I am excited about. But this is bad overall for the residential solar marketplace because 50% of the market is going away based on 2024 data. Now with us, we're about 85% TPO. So we're like, hey, it's not a big deal for us. We're going to go from 85 to 95%, and the other 5% will be cash and loan. So it's not that big of a change for us. So we're excited about it. We think this is going to accelerate the consolidation within our industry, but we probably are looking at 3 consecutive years of contraction. Last year, we had a 32% contraction in 2024. I don't think it's going to be this big this year, but I definitely think we're going to contract again. And there was a report that just came out with Ohm Analytics a couple of days ago where they're projecting that 2026 residential solar is going to be down by 26%. That is why you hear a lot of the negativity in everything that's going on within our industry. But the reality is the economics haven't changed. To me, I don't see why it should go down in 2026. We'll have to kind of wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, we have the data. We look at the commissions, right? It's not like they've gone down. And to your point, the rest of the country, if you're a small company and the only state you operate in is purchase only, there are no TPO products, there's no PPAs, there's no leases. Those are the companies you're talking about that are just in a really bad spot. I mean, and there's a lot of them. That's a huge percentage. We get on these calls with the lobbying groups and, Washington, and a lot of the people on those calls that are yelling about this big, beautiful bill are the ones that are most affected because 100% of their volume is no longer eligible for any tax credits whatsoever. So do you think the majority of the consolidation or the reduction this year is going to come from markets like that? We've seen some other failures, big failures recently of other companies that, aren't just in lone states. And so it just seems like it's kind of across the board. There's just been massive strain. We felt it too. In early June, Mosaic filed for bankruptcy. Shortly thereafter, Sonova filed for bankruptcy. Like it's just been...
It was the day after.
The business day after, right? I think Mosaic was like a Friday, and then it was Sonova on a Monday. And it was just like, who's next? And that's just kind of been this mindset. But since we've had the bill, let's talk about, what is the strategy going forward? Because we just met with all of our executive team and said, okay, which states are viable after, in a post big, beautiful bill environment? And I think initially we were thinking like, we got to cut this state and that state. And the more you look at it and the more you look at our cost structure and just the volume that we're doing in a lot of these states, even if it's not super profitable, it doesn't seem like cutting a bunch of states is really the answer, at least not for us.
No, it doesn't make sense. So, but what the states that are the most concerning are the states that have low electricity rates. Because even if you put a TPO product, and this is a positive about TPO, TPO is very concerned about creating first-year cost savings. Yeah. And so when you look at the securitization in the ABS markets, if anybody is looking into like solar bonds or securitizations that have happened in the loan market, you are starting to see defaults creep up because so many products were sold with large installers that went bankrupt. And then there's companies like Pink and Solar Titan, not to be confused with Titan Solar, that were just selling at $8, $9, $10 a watt. Those are incredibly risky, and they're going to be like very likely to go into default. And I've said this a lot, like if you're going to be here at Freedom, we're going to ask you to sell lower than everybody else in the market. If you don't like it, get out. Like, we don't want you here. And there's a reason for that. Like, we are starting to see solar bonds trade at a discount because the default rates continue to go up. What excites me about TPO is they have guardrails around cost savings. I know a lot of reps hate that. Like, we get a lot of complaints, like the reps are saying like, hey, first year cost savings are 15 cents a watt and the bill's 18 cents. But that is an important guardrail. It can still be wrong, but it still can protect us. And so when you look at TPO and what those future bonds and securitizations will trade at, they're going to trade and do the exact opposite because we have these guardrails in there. And you're not going to see a lot of loan securitizations after 25. And TPOs, it's amazing. But getting back to some of those states, a state like Washington, who we're in, that is one of the most challenging markets for us, because when you look at rates, kilowatt hour like rates, they're anywhere for as low as 6 to 7 cents in parts of Washington to 12 or 13 cents. To create first year cost savings in a TPO, we're going to have to sell in that market at well under $2. And even though that's the goal that Freedom One gets to, we're not there yet. All right. The costs are too high on equipment for a variety of different reasons, but we're just not going to get there. So there is a couple of fringe markets that we're in that concern me, but to us, like, we just got to keep doing what we're doing. Our mission is to accelerate the rate of residential solar adoption in the U.S., and we're going to continue to do that. Now, our plan was to be in all 50 states by the end of next year. I don't think that is possible, but it still might be possible in 30 or 31. But now it's going to be harder to get into those last 15 to 20 states for us, because we're going to have to get our costs down by 50 to 70 cents a watt to open up all those markets. And we're just not there yet. And right now we're seeing the opposite things happen going on with equipment. We're seeing equipment pricing skyrocketed because there's just limited domestic content products out there, and every one of your finance companies demand that you get domestic content because they want to be at that higher blended rate of 45, 46, 47%.
Yeah, so going forward, the strategy hasn't really changed. I mean, there may be some states that don't make as much sense as it used to, but generally, we are still selling on average. What was the number? It was like $6,000 less per project than the average I mean, that was based on what finance companies were showing us, and they have all the data.
Yeah, it's the proudest statistic I have here at Freedom. Like, we are selling a product that is somewhat commoditized. As long as you're using an Enphase or Solar Edge inverter, modules really don't matter. You could argue that a Powerwall is maybe a slightly better battery than an Enphase or Solar Edge or Franklin, but it's all the same stuff. And when you can sell at scale 15% lower than all of your competitors, that's the proudest thing I've ever done in my business career. All right. And we're still able to make a margin, make a profit. We're proud of that. But it's just mind-boggling. And I've went to every finance company and I validated this. And I say, what is the average price of a Freedom system versus everyone else in your network? And we are on average 6,000. And I don't think there's any finance company where we're less than 5,000 versus everything else in their network. And they are starting to understand how important that is and how much risk it is dealing with our competitors that sell high. There's a direct correlation to risk. And a lot of these companies have like directors of risk, and they always are going in and looking at different things like financial statements of the installers and everything like that. But they don't understand what the real risk is. The real risk is how high you sell. If I was running a risk department at a finance company, the number one thing I would look at is how high are they selling? And just because there's a market that is unique, California, just because you can save a customer money does not mean you are morally correct in how you price the system, right? You need to sell lower. We're selling it 23 cents a kilowatt hour. Why are you selling that high? You're doing it because you're greedy and you're selfish, and we need you out of the industry. And like, it's okay to call people out. And a lot of the people in our system did that at one point. A lot of them didn't even know that it was wrong because they had such high red lines from their companies, or they were told by their companies to sell that high. 29 cents a kilowatt hour, still too high unless it's got a full re-roof in it, all right? And that's the stuff that we need to stop. Just because you're creating like savings for a customer doesn't mean it's right. If you know you can sell it with another company, it's the same system, and you could sell it for $6,000 or $10,000 cheaper, what is wrong with you? That's wrong.
Yeah, and it's not good for the industry long term, right? And these are some of the issues that we keep running into. Sales reps out there selling too high, and it gives the industry a bad name. Speaking of sales teams, one of the things that I've seen throughout the last several weeks, it's been hard. It's been hard for the industry. It's been hard for every position, I think, every person that works in solar. And I'm, wondering at certain points during June and early July, like, how are our sales teams going to handle this? How are they going to navigate this? And to see, like, last week we sold 1,700 projects. It's not as high as we had originally forecasted when we did our math back in April, but to see us rebound after the bill and, the leaders just dug in, it's like they put freedom on their backs in a way. And, that's something I'm also incredibly proud of, is just the resilience of our sales leaders and our install crews. Like, it's been really hard, and they really, I think, came through. And you always say, like, you show your true character in the face of adversity. What do you make of the last couple of weeks, and how does that make you feel about the future of our business?
It's been incredible to see everyone like galvanize their support when it's rough. Like, everyone knew this was going on. It doesn't matter if you're an installer, an executive, a sales rep, or a sales leader. Like, everyone knew about the uncertainty, and everybody knew the stakes. And, and we all went over these scenarios where what happens if it gets placed in service, where essentially, like, as soon as the bill is passed, the tax credits are gone.
Yep.
All right. And, like, depending on who you talk to, people were saying the market would be down between 70 to 95%. That was catastrophic for our industry. And we had that hanging over our head. I would love to tell you I was optimistic every day during this time period. There was days I was not. There was days that I was very optimistic, and there was days that I was not. And, like, I'll think back to a couple important things, like having Danny Rubin, who is our VP of Field Operations, at a fundraiser with Susan Collins in Maine about, like, 4 days prior to the Senate voting on that. We did that thinking Susan Collins was not going to be important.
Yeah.
But she became the most important vote. And I don't think we're sitting here with this bill if it wasn't for heroes like Susan Collins and people in the Senate. There was a senator, Tom Tillis, and if everybody hasn't seen it, went up and talked about, like, for 5 minutes on commencement and construction and why it was important to do this. And he was chastised immediately by Donald Trump. And he also announced within a day of that speech that he was not going to run for re-election. He essentially sacrificed his political career to do something that was right. And, like, those are the types of people that we need running our country, not running from politics because he can't stand it. People that are willing to stand up and do the right thing. And even though it might cost them career or earnings in the future, and, like, Susan Collins and Tom Tillis are the heroes of the bill. But, like, the heroes of freedom are our sales leaders, our installers, our, like, leaders at Freedom from an ops standpoint. They're the true heroes that literally battled through adversity, and they did not allow the stress and anxiety or the uncertainty to, like, they went out and they blocked and tackled and they did everything they needed to do. And I'm so just humbled and just so thankful for all of them.
Yeah, and you mentioned I was on the phone with you a lot, and I remember those moments, those hours, or those days, or those nights where, you're the consummate optimist. You always say, like, you got to have faith we can get through this. We can get through this. And I remember there were a few moments where you weren't sure, about the outcome of the industry, the bill, like how is this going to play out? And to be able to fight through that and everybody to just kind of link arms and get through it has been amazing. And so what's next? What do you expect to happen now for freedom? What does the next 6 to 12 months look like for us?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think we have certainty through 32. All right. So I think the next, it's easy to build a business plan when there's certainty. And I said many times during this process, I almost don't even care how bad it's going to be. I just need to know how bad and we can come up with a plan. Now, obviously, we didn't want the tax credits to go away immediately, but we had a bunch of different versions. And I just think the next 6 to 12 months, you're going to see the finance companies heal. You're going to see securitizations happen again. And then you're going to see the liquidity come back to our industry. And I don't think it will happen overnight. I could already feel a sea change in the tones of the conversations from the finance companies, but it's not going to be immediate. It might take weeks, it might take months, but I couldn't be more excited about our industry. And the key thing is I thought for sure the economics were going to go away. I thought we might lose domestic content, and people don't realize if you lose domestic content, you lose about 40 to 50 cents of the EPC on every one of those projects. And to come out of it with the same economics through either 27 or most likely 29 or 30 is way beyond my wildest expectations when this started. And there was this dark cloud. It didn't start when the bill came out of the House Ways and Means Committee. It started when we had Republicans win the presidency, the Senate, and the House. That created a dark cloud. As soon as I knew that, I knew this day was coming. The other thing that we talk about, having certainty, right now, the outcome was pretty good in a scenario where you have the Republicans controlling the House, the Senate, and the presidency. There is elections coming up in 26, all right, and 28. And it's very unlikely, if you look back in the history of the United States, that one party controls the House, the Senate, and the presidency for more than one election cycle.
Right.
So when that happens, could the tax credits come back?
Yeah.
And the other thing that I want to just say, if somebody at the administration or Alex Epstein is listening, it's incredible what we've done. Our administration wants to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. And 2 years ago, we were using 0 domestically manufactured equipment. Now it's over 80%. When you look at the plants that have opened in the last 2.5 years, look at Enphase, look at SolarEdge, look at QCell. There's so many companies. This is incredible what is going on within our industry. It's what the administration wants. Just because it was authored by the other party doesn't mean that it's wrong and it's evil. All right. It's not the new Green Deal scam. It is incredible. It is important. It's one of the most important things going on in our country right now. And we have a chance to take back the industrial revolution. This is the second industrial revolution. Whoever controls renewable energy and energy over the next 100 years will be a world power of epic proportions. You think about AI, everything that's going on, energy drives everything. You have to get your cost of energy down, and you have to have renewable sources of energy. And we don't have to depend on oil, which is in Saudi Arabia or in the Middle East. It can all be done here in the US. The Earth's materials, you can create silicon, all right, which go into the wafers and the cells and everything like that. The whole supply chain can be built and is being built as long as we don't screw it up.
Oh, it's amazing. It's exciting. You know, we thought 2023 was the worst of it. We thought 2024 was going to be the worst of it. Clearly, 2025 has shown solar that there's new challenges for us to solve. But, you know, we're here. We're still growing. And it's good to have that behind us and be able to continue to strategize on the future with the certainty that we have. So thank you for joining. And yeah, thank you for your leadership. I've just seen you just work harder, get up earlier. And you know, it's been amazing to see. So his name is Brett Bouchy. Thank you for joining, and we will see you guys on the next episode.